What's up, guys? Today we're going to be discussing the 5 least valuable players in the NBA. This will be based on players that actually get playing time that negatively impact their team the most. Players who are injured or ride the bench will not be included. So before I start this video, I have to explain to you what the RPM is. The RPM stands for real plus minus, and it measures the player's estimated on-court impact on team performance, and it's measured in net point differential per 100 offensive and defensive possessions. RPM takes into account teammates, opponents, and other additional factors. Players with a good RPM tend to positively impact the game on both offense and defense. The league leaders in RPM are LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard. LeBron James has an RPM of 9.8 and Kawhi Leonard has an RPM of 5.5. Now onto the list. At number 5, we have Anthony Tolliver. Anthony Tolliver played 15.6 minutes per game this season and recorded an abysmal negative 3.6 RPM. He's reportedly a great teammate and locker room presence, and he also started to develop into an effective stretch 4 towards the end of his career, but the end of his career may have snuck up on us sooner than we expected. Tolliver disappointed for Minnesota last season and completely flopped in his return to Portland. At age 34, he doesn't seem to be a viable rotation player anymore. There's a chance Tolliver comes back next year to serve as a veteran mentor, an assistant, or maybe an assistant coach somewhere, but it's more likely that he retires. If he does, he'll have played for 10 different franchises in his not so illustrious but very respectable career. At number 4, we have Bryn Forbes. Bryn Forbes played for the San Antonio Spurs this season and played 25 minutes per game and recorded a negative 0.95 RPM. The NBA is all about shooting these days, and Bryn Forbes can shoot. He's hit an even 40% from 3 during his NBA career so far, and wasn't too far removed from that this season with 38% on 6 attempts per game. As a result, his true shooting percentage, 57%, was above average. The Spurs lacked floor spacers, and Forbes fit that bill. So what's the problem, you ask? Turns out, basketball is more than a half-court game, and whenever the ball crosses that pesky mid-court line, Bryn Forbes starts to become a liability. At only 6'3", Forbes is undersized to play the shooting guard position, which is where the Spurs played him 74% of the time. Partly due to those athletic limitations, he only registered 0.5 steals per game and blocked a grand total of 0 shots in his 1,579 minutes of action. The advanced stats get ugly. Forbes ranks near the bottom at his position in defensive RPM, DPPN, all the alphabet formulas that you can cook up. At the end of the day, least valuable player is about negative impact, and there's plenty here. Forbes is not a bad player in a vacuum, but he did not help the Spurs this year. In fact, their undersized lineup is a big reason why they're struggling so much on defense, where they're ranked 25th in the NBA. As a direct result, they're on track to miss the playoffs for the first time in decades. At number 3, we have Mario Hezonja from the Portland Trail Blazers. This season, he averaged 16.3 minutes per game and recorded a negative 2.79 RPM. During the entire run of the Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum era, Portland has struggled to figure out their wing rotation. That will be tested even more this season with familiar faces like Mo Harkless, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Evan Turner slipping out the door. The team didn't need a star to emerge at forward, but they needed somebody, anybody. In theory, that player should have been Mario Hezonja, a former lottery pick and a live body with a good athleticism and size at 6'8". Signed this summer for a modest price of $1.7 million, Hezonja had the chance to jumpstart his NBA career with a major opportunity on the team. Instead, he flopped like Marcus Smart taking a phantom elbow. Hezonja's biggest problem is that at age 25, he still hasn't found his feel on the court. He's not a good shooter and doesn't use his athleticism to find his way to the line. He was a non-factor on a team that desperately needed him to step up. In fact, the Blazers were so desperate for help that they not only signed Carmelo Anthony, they played him over 32 minutes a game. Again, we see a real least valuable player candidacy here with a direct effect on the standings. The Blazers getting a big fat nothing from Hezonja was a major part of their struggle to get to a 500 record this season. At number 2, we have Dewayne Dedmon, who played for the Sacramento Kings and the Atlanta Hawks this season. He averaged 17.6 minutes per game and recorded a negative 2.51 RPM. The Sacramento Kings signed the big man to a head-scratching 3-year, $40 million deal this summer. Clearly, GM Vlade Divac thought his young Kings were only a few veterans away from making the playoffs, bringing in and overpaying Dedmon, Corey Joseph, and Trevor Ariza. Among the three, Dedmon turned out to be the most disappointing for several reasons. He didn't play well to start the season and got usurped in the rotation by underrated Richaun Holmes. Rather than suck it up, take a deep breath, and take a relaxing dive in the Scrooge McDuck money pool, Dedmon started to whine and complain and push for a trade. For a team that was struggling, Dedmon's headache became the last thing they needed. Ultimately, they ditched him back to where he came from in Atlanta. Now, being difficult and being a prima donna isn't enough to get you LVP honors. You have to stink on the court as well. And sure enough, Dedmon started to check those boxes. Billed as a stretch 5 after hitting some threes in Atlanta, Dedmon lost his shot in Sacramento. He shot only 19.7% from 3 for the Kings, registering a terrible 47.3 true shooting percentage on the season. His defense is okay, but it's not good enough to make up for his poor offensive play. He's not bad enough to get to number 1 on this list, but he's hurt his team plenty this year. And last but not least, at number 1 on this list, we have Isaiah Thomas of the Washington Wizards. Isaiah Thomas played 23 minutes per game this season and recorded a negative 2.75 RPM, which is the second worst among all point guards in the NBA. The most dangerous players aren't necessarily the bad players, they're the players who used to be good. Because of their prior success, they tend to get overplayed by their coaches and drag their teams down with them. It wasn't too long ago that Isaiah Thomas found himself in the MVP conversation for the Boston Celtics, as his incredible shot making helped make up for any defensive limitations he may have as a 5'9" player. That said, a small player like Thomas is going to have a thin margin for error to remain a winning player. He needs to be great offensively to make up for his defense. Unfortunately, his offense has not been great since his infamous injury. He can still make shots, hitting 41% of his threes, but he's not getting inside the paint and not getting to the three-point line, averaging only 1.9 attempts per game. As a result, his true shooting percentage lagged to 53.1%, well below league average. If Thomas isn't making scoring efficiently, then what is he doing to help a team win? He's not a great distributor, averaging only 3.7 assists per game. He's a very poor rebounder with only 1.7 per game. And yes, that defense is still a major problem. According to ESPN's RPM metric, Thomas graded as a negative 4.2 impact per 100 possessions, the second worst in the league behind Trae Young. Basketball Reference lists his defensive rating at 121. For comparison's sake, the worst team defense in the league still held teams under 116. That worst team, the Wizards. You can make an argument that there's still a place for Thomas in the NBA as a spark plug scorer off the bench. Alas, that's not how the Wizards had been using him this season. He started 37 of 40 games for the team. Largely, as a result of that, the Wizards' starting lineup was atrocious defensively. Fellow starters like Bradley Beal and Rui Hachimura ranked toward the bottom of their position in defensive metrics as well. When your lineup stinks defensively, a good coach may look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe we need a change here. Sadly, quick reactions are not Scott Brooks' strong suit. He has the type of sloth-like speed that even frustrate workers at the DMV. The Wizards eventually dumped Isaiah Thomas, but it took far too long to make that shift. To be fair, the Wizards' options at point guard were limited with John Wall injured, veteran Ish Smith is mediocre right now, and Shabazz Napier arrived late in the season. Still, the point here is, almost any competent point guard, like Shabazz Napier, would have helped the Wizards more than Isaiah Thomas. He had become a negative for them. The cold hard truth is that it's very difficult to win basketball games with Isaiah Thomas as their starting point guard. And given that, he is officially the least valuable player in the NBA. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think in the comment section, and please be sure to subscribe.